Normally, ocean winds steer a hurricane on a pretty predictable path, but when two massive storms collide, they trigger a chaotic atmospheric dance called the Fujiwhara Effect. Take the 1995 standoff between the massive Hurricane Iris and a smaller system named Tropical Storm Karen. As Karen and Iris drifted within 1,400 kilometers of each other, their massive outer wind fields physically overlapped, locking their atmospheric circulations together. Instead of crashing head-on, the two systems caught each other's spin. They began rotating around a shared center of mass in the empty ocean between them. Meteorologists call this invisible pivot point a barycenter. If the storms were equal, they'd perform a perfectly balanced orbit. But because Hurricane Iris was vastly larger, it dominated the system. It dragged that barycenter intimately close to its own core. This forced the much smaller Karen to slingshot wildly around Iris at an incredibly accelerated rate. Unable to break free, Karen's spiraling outer bands were relentlessly pulled inward. The larger hurricane completely devoured the smaller one, a brutal mechanism known as cyclone cannibalism. By the first week of September, that initial standoff in the Atlantic Ocean was entirely over. Tropical Storm Karen was completely erased, its wind and moisture perfectly assimilated into Iris's massive, re-intensified structure. When two massive hurricanes cross paths, they physically hijack each other's movements. It's called the Fujiwhara Effect. Take 2009's Typhoon Parma. It bizarrely stalled and looped over the Philippines 3 separate times. This happens when two tropical cyclones drift within 1,400 kilometers of each other. At that exact distance, their outer wind fields physically touch and lock together. Because both massive storms spin counterclockwise, they don't just smash head-on. Instead, the interlocking winds force them to orbit an invisible, shared phantom center point. But if the storms are vastly unequal in size, the math drastically changes. The larger storm pulls that shared center point directly toward itself, turning into an anchor that violently slingshots the smaller storm off its expected path. And if this orbital dance pulls the storms within just 300 kilometers, the larger system will entirely consume the smaller one, just like Hurricane Iris completely swallowed Tropical Storm Karen in the Atlantic back in 1995. So those 3 devastating loops that Typhoon Parma carved across the Philippines weren't just some random weather anomaly. The smaller storm was physically trapped, dragged along as a hostage in Typhoon Malore's massive, unavoidable orbital dance.